Welcome to the Cheer Athlete. Today we're going to talk about when is it okay to return after an injury. If you don't know me, I'm Laura Turner. I'm a cheer PT. I am Move Better Physical Therapy and Fitness, and I help cheer athletes, coaches, and parents navigate the ins and outs of injury prevention and strength and conditioning for cheerleaders. So when is it okay? I see this question. There was a big question on in the crazy cheer moms Facebook group this week, and I want to address it in the podcast because I think this is a huge problem. There was a mom that asked about, my daughter has a fractured foot and is in a cam boot, and when is it okay for her to, is it okay for her to participate in cheer competitions? The answer is no. If she's in a boot, she should not be participating at all. Well, no, she should not be participating in she can't tumble, she can't jump, she can't stunt. She could walk through the routine, but that coach is not going to want that on the mat. So there are some times that it's okay to participate if you're injured. But when your foot's immobilized after a fracture, the bottom line is no. I'm going to back up a little bit. This week I was down for the count. I was sick. I got the flu, something, I don't know, they're calling it strep throat. And I couldn't talk. My voice was shot. And I felt really guilty for not going into work because that's what I'm supposed to do. We are trained to show up, to be there. As a coach, I told my kids, there are no excuses for missing practice. You need to be here all the time. But the truth is, if you have the flu, if you're contagious, if you can't talk, I didn't have a fever, but if you have a fever, you can't be at practice and you need to stay home. If you have an injury, whether it's a sprain or a strain, you might not be able to show up at practice. You can, if you're in a stable place, you can show up. My voice is better now. You might still hear me a little scratchy, but my voice is much better now. I feel much better. I went to work on Monday. I didn't feel 100%, but I was out all last week. I needed to stay home. I needed to rest. I needed to eat better and get my fluids in and rest. I needed the rest. If you're on my email list, you got my email about, needing to take that time and to rest. If you're not on my email list, send me a message. There'll be a link in the bio that you can sign up for more of my little ramblings. But I needed to stay home and rest, right? And I felt much better once I started my antibiotics. I'm still finishing my antibiotics. Right now, I'm okay to go to work. I'm not contagious. My voice was not good on Monday. And really, I just want to stay home and rest again. And the doctor said, you might need to stay home and rest. But I ignored her because it was time for me to be back at work. I was not quite mentally ready, but I was ready. I wasn't contagious. I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I needed to get through it. And lo and behold, the next day I felt better. Sometimes that's going to happen. When you're sick and you're starting to feel better, it's okay to get back in. Maybe you need to take it a little easier. So coaches, parents, recognize when your kids are sick, if they're contagious of any sort, like the first 3 days, usually they're contagious like 2 or 3 days before they actually show symptoms. But if you're contagious, stay the freak home. Do not go to practice. You risk getting everyone else sick. You risk more injury because you don't feel good. And you just prolong the inevitable. When you can stay home, even if it's for a week and it stinks, and maybe you miss a competition, you're going to be better for it in the long run. This goes to you parents, you coaches, and your cheerleaders. All right, that's illness. And that's, hopefully it's pretty common right now. It's winter here in the north. It's winter pretty much everywhere. And the flu is prevalent. COVID's making a comeback. It's like the flu. But we still need to pay attention because there's still some detriments. Strep throat is very prevalent. RSV, all that stuff. It's important to pay attention. We can't just ignore it, and you can't fight through it because you'll end up worse in the long run. But that's illness. barring anything catastrophic with an illness, that just means you got to take some time and rest. Um, and you got to get yourself healthy and all that stuff. Let's talk injury. When is it okay after an injury like a fracture or a sprain, or maybe even just a shoulder strain and a pulled muscle? When is it okay to go to practice and when is it not? The bottom line, if you're mobilized for any reason, you cannot jump, stunt, and tumble. Can you walk through? Maybe. If your weight bearing status for the doctor allows you to do that, they've deemed that your fracture is healing okay, then yeah, get there. You should be there and walk through that practice. There are benefits. If you can't weight bear, if you're on crutches, but you can maneuver, if you're showing up at school, you should go to practice and sit and watch and be on the sidelines, be engaged. Like, no, mark your spot while your team is running through whatever they're running through. Envision yourself back in that spot, because visualization has been shown to really help improve your ability to return quicker and to once you're back and you're recovered, like your body's going to remember what you just visualized. So it's important to be at practice. Plus, the coach might make some changes that will, if you can learn them, you'll know them when you're back in the routine. But you might not be able to actually be in practice. It's not the time to sit and do your homework at practice if you're injured. You need to be paying attention and participating in the most way that you can safely. Healing times for a fracture, for anything, is 6 to 8 weeks. Unless you're the Flash and you heal like that. And none of us are, so let's be honest. It takes 6 to 8 weeks for healing time for a fracture, for a sprain, for a muscle strain. Now, does that mean it's always going to take 6 to 8 weeks to get back? No. For a fracture, yeah. Like the bone has to heal. It has to come together. You have to get good scar tissue and new bone formation. Because if you don't and you get back sooner, not only is there a risk of pain, but there's a risk of further fracture. We don't want it to go through the growth plate because that will stunt the growth of that bone. And you risk, if you just have a fracture of, your fifth metatarsal, which is a pretty big fracture, actually, it can lead to other injuries. So we don't think about that when we're in the act of, an active injury. We don't think, oh, this might lead to a knee injury down the road. But 6 to 8 weeks of rest and letting that fracture heal might save you from a knee injury, a hip injury. Maybe it'll save from, save you from a fall and messing up the timing of your routine, or even just that little half second off that you can't run across the mat because you're not ready to. It has to heal. Injuries suck. They just do. I know that. I work with injuries on a daily basis, and nobody wants to be home and be injured on the long run, right? I get it. I don't want to either. I hated being home sick last week. It stopped me from doing everything that I've been trying to do this year. But you have to let your body heal. It's not just about you, it's about your teammates. Yeah, you missing, your one athlete missing is going to throw the rest of the routine off. And if it's a season ending injury, or it's a, like a 3-month ending injury and you miss, you have to let it heal, because you want to get back next year and you want to participate next year. And if you're a parent pushing your kid to get back sooner than they're ready, what is it going to look like for them in 20 years? Like, you were an athlete 20 years ago ish. If you got injured, do you have any aches and pains around that injury now? Ankle sprains and knee pains have a way of coming back and talking to us later down the road. It doesn't mean it's going to stop you from doing everything that you want to do. It doesn't mean that you can't keep participating. It doesn't mean that you have a current injury. But pushing through an injury and not letting it heal fully sets you up for longer term issues down the road. And our job as coaches, as parents, is to provide the best opportunities for our athletes, for our kids, so that they are healthy and happy in the long run, and that they can continue to cheer or to do what, to get out and snowshoe, as I'm looking out my window now, and participate. When we don't let them heal, we restrict them from having that opportunity, and we are actually putting them in harm's way. I don't mean to be on a rant here. I'm pretty passionate about this. I want kids to be back on the mat ASAP. I think it's important. I don't think injuries in cheerleading are as bad as the world sees, but I do think that athletes in general, and cheerleaders are not alone in this, tend to brush off and want to get back into the playing field sooner, and they push themselves to get back sooner than they're physically ready to do. Something that might be okay to get in and still practice, if you had a mild sprain of your ankle and you can still walk on it, you can weight bear, you can in place kind of hop, you can hop forward and back, you can single leg stance, and it's not creating excruciating pain, and you're not continually rolling it at the same time, you might be fine, and you might not even need a brace. I worked with somebody who had a shoulder injury. Just was having a lot of shoulder pain. She was a base, was really struggling to get the stunts to hit. She was still participating. She just took out her handsprings and round offs and was doing more standing tucks, and or running, tumbling wasn't bothering her as much, so she was able to do that, but wasn't doing those handsprings. So she pulled herself out of that, but she was still trying to stunt and base, but it was getting worse and worse, and it was limiting what she could do. We worked together, and that was a self-limiting injury. She didn't have any signs of a rotator cuff tear or a bicep tear or a labral tear, which are very common with shoulder injuries in cheerleading. It was postural dysfunction. She needed to learn where to hold her shoulder and position better. She needed to regress a little bit and not really go overhead, but she could still work skills at a prep or a half level. She just couldn't extend, and she had to switch. There were some skills she couldn't do just yet, but there were some that she could progress and keep working on. It was fine for her to be in there. She just had to know, hey, it's getting sore. I need to back off a little bit now. Or, hey, I'm going to hold off on my tumbling right now so I can hit this pyramid today that we're working on, but I'll make sure I get back into that another time, and the next day. So sometimes kids need a little break, and sometimes they just need to modify, but sometimes they can actually fully participate with just those modifications. How do you know if your kid's ready to go back in and to be on the playing field? First, check with your movement professional. If there's a fracture, if there's a sprain, if there's a strain, they should be in physical therapy doing the work to get their mobility back and get their strength back. So generally, it's okay for your physical therapist to okay them back into, a physical therapist or athletic trainer to okay them to get back into their participation routine. In some cases, there might, I'll defer to the doctor because you're better, but you're not quite there yet. Or like in the case of a ACL reconstruction, there's a time frame and a time limit. And I might say, yeah, this cheerleader can do, all the skills that I need them to do in the routine, but we're not quite there yet on their strength end. So let's check with the doctor and see what they say. So there are times that I'll defer to the doctor to get back into a routine. But most of the time, your physical therapist can make that decision. If you're not seeing a physical therapist, check with your doctor. Cat's here playing. If you're not seeing a physical therapist, check with your doctor. They're the ones who need to clear. If you have an athletic trainer at school, check in with them. They'll look at your mobility and that also. I think as a long-term physical therapist who's been doing this for a very long time, that it's important to, one, have full mobility back to where they were at baseline, maybe better, because maybe that's what contributed to the injury in the first place. They need to have good manual strength. And what does that mean? It depends, do they have control of their movement in the activity that they're going to do? We do muscle testing, and I use muscle testing a lot to check if something's overworked versus underworked. not always reliable in that manual muscle testing, but there are norms for knees and shoulders that you can, use a dynamometer, which is a uh, or a handheld muscle testing device that you can get, is it pretty equal to the opposite side? I'm going to also look at, can they move well? Can they do the different movement patterns that they need to do to get back onto the field? A squat, a lunge, uh, can they touch their toes? Can they lean backwards? Can they twist? Can they stand on one leg? Um, all those things. And just because they can't do it doesn't mean they can't get back in. But what do they look like when they're doing it? If they're complete chaos, no, they shouldn't be back in. So it's not just a matter of like, yeah, things are healed, but like, is it healed? Do they have mobility now? Because once you've been immobilized for a period of time, if whether so an ankle sprain, you're immobilized in a cam boot, which is a ankle, limited ankle mobility. You can take it off to shower, but you're not supposed to walk without it. If you've been in that for even just 2 weeks, the ankle is going to stiffen up, and the muscles are going to get a little weaker, and your gait's going to change just a little bit. It comes back pretty quickly. Once the tissue is healed, you do the work and you do your mobility work, it'll get back pretty quickly. But if you're not ready and you don't have that mobility, you don't have that strength, and you don't have the good motor control, you get back too soon, you're going to get re-injured some point down the road. So the range of motion, the strength, so the mobility, the strength, and the stability and the motor control are the main things I look at. People are going to have pain when they get back in. I'm not so worried about the pain. If the pain is a 10 out of 10 and you can't stand on it, you can't walk on it, you can't move the joint on your own, then you really should go to the emergency room. If you can walk on it, it hurts, but it's manageable. You lay down, it gets better. Or you sit and you rest, it gets better. It's okay to work through. Sometimes through practice, the pain might get worse. That's where you need to tell your athletes to let you know when things are starting to feel worse, especially as they're starting to come back. They might need to take it slower and ramp up and not just go full out gung ho. We want that to happen, but the reality is they need to ramp up gradually. And hopefully your therapist is telling you that at the same time. Yes, they can come back, but I only want them to participate at 50%. Work with them, have a conversation with your physical therapist or their physical therapist, and find out when the best time is for them to return fully. Competing to me means they're ready to go full out. They have no restrictions. Maybe they need to wear a soft ankle brace, or kinesio tape or something like that makes them feel more confident in what they're doing. That is okay to get back and participate. But if they're in a hard boot and they can't walk without pain, then they shouldn't be jumping, they shouldn't be tumbling, and they shouldn't be doing stunting, which may injure themselves, because if it hurts or if they get that splinter pain that happens when you break something and they move just the right way, it will set them off into further risk of another, either a bigger fracture, longer healing time, further injury to themselves, or even worse, they fall, they injure other people, and then the whole group is out. So it's hard. I know we all want the kids to be in there, and be back in the game quickly and our full team. It sucks when you have to change something around. But isn't this for the long haul? Don't we want our athletes to be in this for the long run? And don't we want to be healthy and keep them loving cheerleading and feeling like they can progress for the long run? I do. That's my goal. And that's what I hope to relay. I don't mean to be a downer. I don't mean to be calling out this person, because I think it was a legit question. Kid wants to be back in. I feel I can walk on my foot now. It's fine. But, realistically, they're in a boot for a reason. So if you're listening to this and you're that person that asked that question, please take this from my heart. I just want your athlete to be safe, to be healthy. And I think that you're not alone in asking this question. There's a lot of people that ask the questions like this. I worked with somebody in the clinic football player who had a pretty bad injury and was really not ready to get back into playing full on. And the father was like, "Oh no, he's got to go in tomorrow." I'm like, well, he can't, he's a quarterback and he can't actually move his arm in the position to throw. You know, ultimately they made their own decision. What the kid's going to look like in 5 years. I have another football player that I'm working with right now who's out of school and he's got ongoing knee pain, shoulder pain, back pain. Like, why? Because maybe they didn't fully recover and heal and get into a good routine to keep that injury moving forward and keep your body moving forward after the injury. That's a topic for another discussion. But in the meantime, have a protocol in place. Make sure you get clearance. Make sure that they're ready to do the skills that they need to be able to do. Don't come out of a boot before it's too soon. Wearing a boot through the day at school and then putting on a sneaker at practice is not going to help that injury to heal. Listen to what the doctors say, what your physical therapists say, what your athletic trainers say, and let things heal, let them get stronger, get the mobility back, and keep moving forward so that they can stay after this for life. And you can be happy watching them at the same time and winning your worlds and your summits and getting bids to nationals and all that fun stuff. If I can help you along the way, if you're not sure, please reach out to me, Laura at MoveBetterLC.com. You can find all information on how to work with me or to connect with me on social media and for tips on exercises and more along these lines in the links below. I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks for bearing with my scratchy throat and ramblings on keeping our cheer athletes safe. Make it a good week. Don't forget, when in doubt, breathe it out. Take life one step at a time. And as my friend Drew Kelleher said, you're responsible for your own vibes. Go get the day.